today, we're changing it up. I have been going back, well, not me, my amazing team has been going back and asking some of the other podcasts that I've actually been on if we could utilize that interview on Mamas in Control. So throughout the weeks to come, you may hear some interviews that I've done in the past with other people. So let's dive into today's episode. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think.
This is the Parenting ADHD Podcast with Penny Williams. Each week, Penny shares proven ADHD parenting strategies and her hard-won ADHD mama wisdom. This is not your physician's podcast. Penny discusses the genuine grit of the moment-by-moment peaks and valleys of this special parenthood. It's time to beat the chaos and challenges of raising a child with ADHD. Here's your host, Penny Williams.
Welcome back to the Parenting ADHD Podcast. I am excited today to be talking to Heather Chauvin. We're going to talk about how there must be something more in a lot of different ways for kids with ADHD and autism and parents of those kids. Thanks for being here, Heather. Will you just start by introducing yourself, who you are, what you do?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Penny. I love having these conversations.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for a while, I'm a mother for a while. It's been a while. I'm a mother of 3 boys. They're 13, 8, and 5. I always have to think, and then when someone has a birthday, it's like, dang it, you messed up my flow. So 13, 8, and 5, 3 very different boys, different way of being in the world. So the first one's always the guinea pig and you try to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And the second, I gave birth to him 13 years ago. I knew things needed to change. And now through that journey, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that, now I support women, helping them really understand their children, what their children's behavior is telling them, mm-hmm. and how to really understand themselves and create a life that they feel good about. So waking up going, I have energy and I feel content. And it doesn't matter if you have 1 child or 25 children, you can feel good. And I want women, I'm kind of here to change that, stigma around, look at me, look how exhausted I am, look how burnt out I am, doing more. And I really help women take the strategic action, create the plans, the mindsets, and the accountability, because change is very uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's hard. It's certainly hard. And especially with our own mindsets, it's super hard to change that. It takes work. A lot of times I talk with parents and they say, I heard what you said and I'm trying. And I'm like, it'll take you a long time. It's something we practice, I think. And it's a process. It takes time to get there.
Yeah. I mean, it's commitment and devotion. And as I continue to expand who I am in my work, in my personal life, my parenting, realizing there's this no arriving. We're never arriving like, when I achieve that, then I will be happy. When the kids are older, then I'll go after my dreams. Mm-hmm. When so-and-so enters school, then I'll have more time. It's interesting because then we play these little mind games with ourselves and those milestones happen and you're like, I actually don't have more time. Why is that? And it all starts in the mind.
Yeah, for sure. I think, the mindset for parenting kids with special needs like ADHD and autism is a huge part of our success because there's Dr. Dale Archer, I believe it is, who talks about the psychological victim or the psychological survivor. And I've talked about it on the podcast here before, but that's a really huge thing to choose, make that choice. How are you going to live your life? How are you going to go forward from being the parent of this child and having this diagnosis? You really can choose.
Yes, you can. And I think it takes a lot of you got to be ready to hear the message, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be ready for it. And I think about what was it that pushed me when I became a mother to really think outside the box and go against what everybody around me was telling me. And part of that was because I was a young mother, and then I give birth to this child, and already I'm considered, a statistical failure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I actually was terrified because when I was pregnant with my son, I didn't want to be alive. I didn't, I was a severely depressed teen, and the people around me weren't really good role models on how to live a happy, emotionally successful life. I didn't have those role models. So I was just kind of playing by, the ecosystem, right? Just being involved in that. And then I looked at him and I'm like, there has to be another way. There has to be another way. And there's something I talk a lot about. It's like soul aches, the breadcrumbs, where you're attracted to something. And part of that was when my son turned 4, I started noticing. So at this point, I'm like a social worker, like a full-blown mental health social worker, working with families who just so badly want to thrive, but don't know how. And what I'm noticing is everybody is putting these Band-Aid solutions, or they're giving a diagnosis, or even just labeling children like that child is behavioral. What does that mean? Yeah, my child has behaviors. He's angry. He's frustrated. Can somebody please tell me what is going on? And you are the professionals. Why can't you tell me? So then my son started acting out. There was anxiety. There was like anger, whipping toys across the room, all of these fun things. And I thought, okay, I have a degree, an undergrad in child development. I work with mental health professionals, and I don't know how to solve this problem.
Yeah.
And that was scary. And so part of the breadcrumb for me was the word meditation kept coming up. Meditation, meditation, meditation. And so being the mother that we are, okay, I got to get my kid to meditate. He needs to meditate. Great. I am a huge advocate of mindfulness and teaching these skills to our children. So then I dive in. I'm like, okay, I'm going to teach him how to meditate. Through this process, Penny, guess what my aha moment was?
What?
You'll never guess. I was the one that needed to meditate.
Everybody needs it.
Yeah. I was the one with the anger issues. I was the one with the severe anxiety, and I didn't know it because it was just part of my DNA. It was part of what I mean by DNA. It was just so engrossed in who I was, and I had it as a child and as a teen. And that's why I slept all the time, because it wasn't that I was depressed. That was my drug of choice, to numb out and sleep.
Right.
To get rid of that feeling. Yeah. So my son taught me how to take back control of how I wanted to feel by purely trying to help him manage his own big emotions. And then, so as I started implementing, these tools and strategies that I was learning, I then started to feel in control of my own anger and my own anxiety. And I was yelling less, and I was able to be more present. So then I'm like, oh, well, I feel in control of my anger, so I can then kind of not only role model for you, but teach you how to do the same.
Yeah.
And then realizing, now I'm in a coach position with my child. Now I'm in a teaching position. I'm not in this, I am the parent, you are the child, be quiet. And then there's this conflict and stress and all of that. So I had to change my mindset about what is my responsibility and role as a mother. And it's definitely not to do laundry and, be your chef and your Uber driver and all of this. It's to be your spiritual teacher and spiritual guide, and like help you through this life. Not even spiritual. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. Help you to feel in control of your big emotions, teach you the life skills of how to be a happy, successful person.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. And, there's so many studies and so much more coming out now in both ADHD and autism worlds about mindfulness and not only the benefit of it for our kids, but the benefit to us as their parent. Because when we're able to pause and look at things from a distance and more clearly instead of being reactionary in the moment, we're handling it better. Again, like you said, we're modeling something more appropriate to handle our emotions. And it just makes total sense. And it also honors, I think, who your child really is. If they have a diagnosis or they don't, whatever is specifically unique about them, it honors that in the way that you interact with them when you're more mindful of those things.
Yeah. And I was having a conversation with a woman a few days ago because she was in my Teach Your Kid to Meditate program. And I tell everybody, this isn't about, yes, you can teach mindfulness to your child, but this is about you being mindful of the life you want to be living and how you want to feel. And her child, I don't really know what his diagnosis was, but he had severe behaviors. And she's like, Heather, we have full-time help. We've been through every therapy you could possibly think about. And I want to start introducing this. So I said, great, let's make it, we have to be very creative, right? Because sometimes we get in this mindset of it needs to look like this. It needs to look like that. And I said, maybe you can put headphones in and have a guided meditation or some music and just have your son jump on the trampoline or run around vigorously. Sitting down might not be what he's going to do.
Yeah.
And then she said, but he can't wear headphones. The sensory stuff for him is just out of this world. And I said, great. But she said, we do have this other device that helps kids with, the sensory processing stuff and being overstimulated. So she goes, we can do it with that. And I said, great. So I find parenting as a co-creation where oftentimes we get in this angry and fresh, like our anger and overwhelm is just too all consuming. And then we're like, can somebody please fix this problem for me? When really it's a co-creation. And to piggyback off of that conversation, while I was having this conversation with the woman, I said, when's the last time you did something for yourself? Like, when do you do these things for yourself? Do you meditate? Do you journal? Do you go for walks? Do you exercise? What is your eating habits like? And she laughed. And I said, I know. This is your full-time job. Like, and if you're not doing this full-time, you're at a full-time job and then you come home and you're doing this full-time. It's a 24-hour gig. Yeah. She's like, Heather, I just can't. I don't have the energy and I don't have the time. And I said, there's a module that I teach called energetic time management. And it's not about time management. It's about managing your energy in alignment with how you want to feel and setting up your day, your week, your month, your year like this. Maybe not so years. Sometimes we got to go like 12 to 24 hours at a time, right? Take it one moment at a time.
Baby steps.
Exactly. But I said, you need to prioritize this. You need to prioritize your energy because it's that age-old annoying saying, right? Your oxygen mask, if it's not on first, do not put the other person's on. And I get it. We have so much love to give as women. We'll do anything for our children. I would literally donate organs for them, like without anesthetic. Like, you would do anything for your kids. But the truth is, we have to think counterintuitively for it to be sustainable and healthy.
Yep. Big picture.
Exactly. And when we don't do that, so I said, you need to implement this first, or I'm not going to let you go to level 2. And she was like, oh, I'm so resistant to doing this. And I said, this is why we need these people in our lives to tell us what to do, because resistance, change, right? Changing the current, the flow of water is very difficult. And that's what we have to do as parents, especially as women, when we want to create these connections and see our children thrive.
Yeah. And I think that mindset piece, at the beginning, we can go all the way back to how do we picture parenthood? What did we expect parenthood to be like? And when you're parenting a child with special needs, you really have to throw that out the window. Authoritarian parenting is not going to be as effective as this kind of collaborative parenting that you're describing. And that's That's huge. That's as big to me as the self-care piece. Both of those are really that kind of foundational work that you need to do before you're going to do successful work with your child.
Mm-hmm. There was, I don't know the woman's name, but it was The Good News About Bad Behavior. Have you heard of this book?
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
Okay. My colleague, Janet Allison, she runs Boys Alive, and she was talking about this book and how there's this other model of parenting, and it's called the apprenticeship model, where it's kind of more of like the role modeling, right? Where we're teaching and guiding our children how to do that, coach and student type deal, rather than, I'm the adult, you're the child. I have a voice. You don't. My opinion matters. Yours does not. Or too relaxed, right? Because then you get terrified of, I don't want to be abusing my child mentally, physically, emotionally. So I'm just going to shut down and not say anything, and then feel like they're walking all over you. So it's like, where do you find this balance or alignment? And I'm learning more about it, but the whole apprenticeship model.
Yeah, I love that. And that's very similar to, I think, to Ross Green's work on behavior.
Yes.
He has the collaborative and proactive solutions model, which was huge for us and so many other families. But there are other kind of parenting approaches that are very similar to that. And I think, like the coach approach, that's what's really most successful for our kids. And really you have to sit back and ask yourself, what's the goal? What is my goal in parenting? I want to raise a child who can function on their own, function successfully, and have a happy life, right? And so if you're just commanding and they're, following your will, is that really going to get you to that goal? To me, not successfully. And you'll probably do some damage in the interim with that approach. But yet that's the approach that we all grow up thinking is what parenthood is like.
Yeah. And everything is an evolution, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about medicine here or health, and that's a whole nother conversation, but there's so much research constantly coming out about the evolution of medicine and health. And I was listening to a podcast this morning there was a physician talking about how part of his model is teaching people how to meditate and change their diet. And then their anxiety and depression is like minimal. And yes, it's not perfect, and minimizing screen time. And so there's so many things that we can do. And I think people just get stuck in their ways, or you look around. Like, I think it's beautiful that you and I can have these conversations. And I talk about this a lot on my podcast, the Mom is in Control podcast, but there's nobody censoring us.
Right.
We can talk about what we want to talk about because we're passionate women, moms who just want to make a difference. And I think that's the beauty of today, is that we do have the awareness. And for those who are just stuck in old ways, a lot of this stuff is not in mainstream culture yet. So it's like you're swimming upstream and people are like, what are you doing? I wouldn't do that. Somebody else, didn't tell me to do that. So therefore I'm not going to. And we're just operating from belief systems of how we were parented. And, even if you had a horrible childhood, your parents are doing the best that they could. And they just don't know different. And I see parenting as, you like a relay race. You pass the baton, you do the best you can, you learn, you grow, you evolve, and then you pass this on to the next generation.
Yeah. And even if your parents were great, that doesn't necessarily mean that their approach is the best approach for your own child. I had a good childhood, but I grew up in a strict household where there wasn't really a lot of flexibility, and that was fine for me. But for my own child, that would be horrendous. It would be a nonstop, emotionally intense battle every moment. And so, it's really important for us to take into account every unique quality of our own kids, to understand their truth, what's true for them, and use that as part of your compass for your own parenting.
Yeah. Yep. And every child is different too.
Yeah.
What I can do for one child, I cannot do for the other.
Yep. Yep. And even in your own household with multiple kids, there, you have to, and a lot of people focus on equality and, well, I have to do the exact same thing for each of my kids. Well, equality is really what they need in that moment, not an absolute equal, excuse me, an absolute equal, object or treatment or punishment or reward or whatever it is. It has to be different for each person because each person is different.
Exactly. Exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about the fact that our children are never going to be normal. And so there's no fixing required. Can you talk a little about how a mom or a dad would start to shift their mindset into that direction a little bit?
Yes. So it's funny because when you said normal, I'm like, oh, who wants to be normal?
Yeah.
I don't.
Word.
I've never felt normal. Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad for that because I have such a rich life, meaning I see colors brighter and I feel like I have this emotional freedom, this freedom within me. And if I was normal, I would be burnt out, miserable, stressed, and anxious. Yeah. So I get it when people say, I just want my child to be normal, because what does normal mean? Well, maybe it's a little bit easier to integrate your child into a classroom, or maybe, you're not getting those phone calls from the school, or maybe they can join, a soccer team or a sports team and there's no discrimination or anything like that. And you can take them out in public and they have their quote unquote normal meltdowns, but they can still function. Mm-hmm. So there's so much that I think all of us take for granted at all times. None of my children have been formally diagnosed, but they have probably undiagnosed things, but I just have learned how to manage it and to shift certain things. And it's never gotten to that point where I'm like, okay, more needs to happen here. But we've had to change schools. We've had to create things that just don't work for our children. And to be honest, there's a lot of shame that comes up. Yep. There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of, what did I do wrong? I mean, you go down right from like, did I eat something bad when I was pregnant to, I was really stressed out when I had this kid. Is that why? Yeah. So there's a lot of inner work that needs to happen. And really understanding, like I take the perspective of your child's behavior is speaking to you. So a lot of the women, and I say women because I mostly work with women, but a lot of the families that I attract, getting a diagnosis is absolutely terrifying. And I'm sure it is for everybody, or a huge punch in the gut once you do get a diagnosis. And a lot of people live in denial of like, oh no, there's nothing wrong with my child. So they will actually avoid going to a doctor or a therapist or even just getting any additional support for their child. Meaning, I'm like, well, how many services do I use? Like massage, chiropractic. I use energy healing, like for myself, and realizing our children need the same support, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're human beings as well. So I see behavior as a language. Like I said, it doesn't need to be fixed. A story that I often tell is when I first got into this work and decided to leave, my corporate job and literally let go of my title as a social worker because I wanted to do it on my own terms. I was doing these workshops on meditation and mindfulness with children, and the parents would drop off the child. And one of the parents said to me when she came to pick up her daughter, "Did you fix her behavior?" And this was the first time I was starting to hear these things. And I was like, oh, that was never the intention. Like, she's actually perfect the way she is. And I could see these kids as they're being dropped off. I'm like, okay, guys, we're going to do this today. We're going to do this today. And it was very creative and playful. And they were like, well, shouldn't we do this or shouldn't we do that? And I could see that they already had these rules and expectations of how they were supposed to act, probably from previous conversations with their parents. Yep, and And I said, no, you're perfect just the way you are. Like, this is going to be fun. This is going to be exciting. But I could see that the parents' expectation of putting on their, like, you're going to go here. You're going to learn how to calm down. You're going to learn how to deal with this behavior because I can't. And that was my first indicator that, our expectations as parents that my child needs to be this way. It gets that old saying of, like, it drives me nuts when people are like, oh, well, don't you want to have another child just to try for a girl?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't understand. Like, this is something we actually don't have control over. And even though science is trying to make it mainstream that we can control these things, I think it's ridiculous that, we're so controlling as human beings, trying to control every aspect of our child, including, the 1.2 children that each family has or something. It's mind blowing to me.
Yeah. And I think that that need for control is where we get so tripped up. And this idea of perfection, which social media has a lot of blessings, but one of the curses is that we see the highlight reel of other people's lives. And so it looks like everybody else has this fantastic life and these picture perfect, birthday parties for their kids and all of these things. And it's just not reality. And so, I think we inadvertently set that bar at a place that isn't achievable. As long as we're looking for perfection or we're hanging on to the idea of control, we're always going to feel like a failure.
Yeah, I giggle when you make the social media comment because I have this like saying in my mind, which I don't really tell anybody, is the prettier it looks, the worse off they are.
Yeah, right.
Meaning, typically when it looks perfect on the outside, that means they're really struggling on the inside.
Yeah.
And it's a theory I have. And every single time, it's proven that, when we feel, this is the thing, this is the whole essence of why my brand is called Mama's in Control, because we try to so badly control the outside. That is your behavior speaking to you, indicating that something internally feels out of control.
Yeah.
And, we do this as adults, and children do it. Right. So
yeah.
I see people go, oh, my child has OCD, or my child has, is very angry or bites or kicks or does all of this. And I'm like, yes, because they don't feel in control on how to control this emotion. Exactly. So the only thing that they can control is outwardly hitting you. Mm-hmm. And it's going to take more than meditation and mindfulness. It's going to take a whole understanding of what your child is doing, and it's lifelong learning, right? You don't just eat vegetables for one meal and then you're like, okay, I'm done. You have to show up every single day and do these things. It's a lifestyle shift. It's a parenting shift. But the reason why people outwardly look controlling is because there's something inside saying, I need your attention.
Yeah. Yeah. We're pushing down all that chaos and not letting others see it, or trying not to let others see it. Mm-hmm. Let's talk just a second about expectations. You brought this up a minute ago, and I just wanted to go into it a little bit more because it's something that I talk a ton about for parents of kids with ADHD and autism. And it goes really for any kid and any parenting, but, we have to have appropriate, attainable expectations for our kids. So when that mom is dropping off her child and thinking that one lesson of meditation with you is going to fix her behavior, she had an expectation that wasn't realistic. And so she was setting herself up to be disappointed, whether she realized it or not. And that's something that, I work on a lot with parents, because again, that's another hurdle that you have to get beyond before you're really going to do good work. When you're going to have some positive improvements, and those expectations really come again from that traditional parenting dynamic that we learn. But it's so, so crucial to really look at who our kids are, as you were just talking about with the behavior. in using that behavior as communication and working from that place to develop those expectations for that child.
Well, yeah, we're so worried about what other people think too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where these expectations come. You either have these expectations from your past, right? Yeah. Of, what your parents' expectations were of you, or maybe your parents didn't have high expectations of you. So you've done the complete opposite and have extremely high expectations of your children, depending what your mindset was going into parenthood, and then realizing, I don't have a child that was the child, or this is the life that I thought I would have as a parent. I see a lot of people, I think there's a grieving process when we become parents as well, of the life.
Absolutely.
The life that we used to have, or the person we used to be. Right. But are you familiar with Byron Katie's work, Loving What Is?
I am not.
Okay. You need to. Oh, she's magic. She's been around for a really long time. And she has these 4 questions of, is it true? Do you absolutely know it's true? Who would you be without that thought? And then she does the turnaround. So when I started listening to her, so it's Byron Katie, Bryan Katie. Byron Katie.
A link in the show notes
Ryan, Byron Katie. I don't know. The work. It's called The Work. So I think you can go to thework.com. Anywho, there's this one question that she asks at the end when you're supposed to turn the statement around. So, my child makes me angry because he won't listen to me when I ask him to clean his room. Mm-hmm. And, turn it around. Is it true that your child makes you angry? Child is making you angry. No, that's a reaction that you're personally having, right?
Yeah.
Who would you be without that thought? How would you react to your child? Well, if I wasn't so triggered that he wouldn't clean his room the first time I asked, I'd probably be more loving and kind to him. Right. And I would say, hey, honey, can you clean your room? And then I would, I would approach it in a completely different way. And then he might actually clean his room because my energy is coming from a loving, kind place rather than clean your room now. I'm going to take everything away from you and blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. And at the end, it's the turnaround, which is I am mad at my son, or my son is mad at me. Whatever your question was, you turn it around on yourself. So my son is angry. I'm angry at my son. The turnaround would be, I'm angry at myself.
Wow.
And then sometimes people usually cry at this point and go, oh, dang, I'm angry at myself. Why are you angry at yourself? And then that's a whole other can of worms that you open. I'm angry at myself because I feel like I'm failing as a mother. Mm-hmm. I'm angry at myself because I feel like I'm failing my child and I can't give him what he wants. I'm angry at myself because I don't know who I am and I'm depleted and angry and frustrated and resentful. And I don't even know if I want to be a mother anymore.
Wow. That's some powerful stuff. I have goosebumps.
Yeah. And it
really is. And it really does.
Questions.
Yeah, it really does, though, help you get to the root where if you didn't ask it in that way to turn it around on yourself, you wouldn't think in that way. You wouldn't get there. But then that, you're really digging up kind of those deep truths by doing that. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I heard in your statement, my son won't clean his room, was that won't is a red light word for parents. Is it really that he's choosing not to, that he's choosing not to do what you ask and please you? Or is it that he can't under the parameters that are happening at the moment?
Yes.
So that's a big piece too. But I love that.
Especially with the male brain. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. Yeah. And I'm not an expert, but what I've discovered is, they need a little more guidance sometimes, especially age appropriateness. And if they have other blocks that are getting in their way and need additional support, sometimes they need the visual, right? Yeah. They need step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5.
Yeah.
It's not just go clean your room, because that in itself can be overwhelming to the nervous system.
Yeah, and we don't all have that same sense of planning and organization. For ADHD specifically, there's a lot of executive functioning delays and deficits. And so, I'm a natural organizer. My son will live in filth and not even notice, like totally different beings. And it's just that our brain works in different ways. It's not that he chooses to be messy or he chooses to defy me because I would rather it be clean. It's all in that mindset. It's all in the perspective that we take about each and everything.
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. We've had an awesome conversation, and I will definitely post links to everything that you've mentioned in the show notes. This episode, the show notes will be available at parentingadhdandautism.com/039 for episode 39. And you'll be able to link up too with Heather and all the work that she's doing. You can connect. You can certainly take advantage of, I know you have some courses, online courses, and maybe some workshops. So there's lots of goodies there to take advantage of as well.
Yeah, for sure. They can check out, just go to my website, Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN.com. And my TEDx talk is on there as well, called Dying to Be a Good Mother.
Awesome. Yeah, so much good stuff here that we could talk about probably all day, you and I. I feel like we're on the same wavelength with this stuff, but we'll give everybody a digestible podcast here, and they can certainly reach out to you and do more work that way.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Penny.
Yeah, thank you. And with that, we will conclude this episode of the Parenting ADHD podcast, and I'll see everybody next time.
Thanks for listening to the Parenting ADHD podcast with Penny Williams. If you like what you just heard, be sure to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher. Visit the website parentingadhdandautism.com for so much more on successfully raising kids with ADHD.